So hello everyone, welcome to our 11th session, the first from the Phase 5, Monitoring and Evaluation, which is led by Life Science University from Warsaw, Poland. So today's agenda here, so Aleksandra will introduce us to food system evaluation. I will present a case study on local food strategy evaluation in France, which will be followed by an exercise. So for now, I pass the word to Aleksandra.
I will briefly introduce you to the topic of food system evaluation. First, I would like to consider why do we need food system assessment, what is our goal, and what we can achieve through this kind of evaluation. So, of course, we can collect some data, and by doing this, we can contribute in food system change. However, the food system evaluation and the data we collect and then the data we disseminate, by doing this, we will support some specific actors. And this is very important to know what kind of actors and what kind of agenda we are supporting. So we need to be aware of our preliminary assumptions. And if, for example, we do assessment of industrial food system, we could have quite good outcomes in terms of high technology centers solutions, industry-driven policy, and export-driven policy. But in this course, and of course afterwards, our goal is a food system transformation towards a sustainable one. So we should be focused in issues such as social justice, food and nutrition security of all, agroecology, and local circular economies. So it is very important when we are doing any evaluation, and also in case of food system evaluation, it is important what an indicator represents and what kind of indicators we pick in our framework. So, for example, the efficiency perspective promotes use of technology, efficient chemical use and waste reduction, reinforcing technocratic fix and top-down approach. But it overlooks issues related to food access and quality and social economy. So when we are speaking about sustainable food system evaluation, we should consider the ecosystem assessment perspective. And this perspective promotes things such as food access and food security, geographical, socioeconomic, and cultural context, inclusiveness and participatory aspects, connections between indicators at the global and national scale with community initiatives. Of course, always we should be critical and think if we didn't overlook some other aspects, because the whole situation is dynamic. So what is important that we are thinking about ecosystem? It means that we need to have holistic approach, and our approach will be comprehensive, including all aspects. And because it is changing in time, we need to be critical and think if the indicators we are choosing are still valid, and maybe we should adjust them to the situation that we have. What is also very important is the term ecosystem in the ecosystem assessment perspective. Ecosystem means this comprehensive approach, but it also means that we need to focus on locality. Ecosystem is always local. So we need to consider geographical, socioeconomic, and cultural context. And this is also very important when we are doing food system evaluation. So our indicators should be place-specific. We need to choose place-specific indicators. And for this, we can also use food threats analysis. And just to remind, a food threat is the geographic region that produces the food for a particular population. The term is used to describe a region of food flows from the area where it is produced to the place where it is consumed. So when we are using food threat term and when we are doing food threat analysis, we we can choose, we can focus on local aspects, but also we need to remember about all the links that are on the regional level, but also in a global scale. So food shed analysis enable us to have this local approach, but also to see the whole links and connections that are in region and globally. In this ecosystem assessment perspective, it is very important to choose the indicators which are the best levers for change at a particular time in a particular place, because it is pointless to do this kind of food system evaluation just for collecting data or doing some academic papers, preparing some academic papers, or doing some theoretical work. We would like to have a very practical impact in changing food system towards a sustainable one. We can choose from many indicators, but we need to be sure that the one we are picking are important in a particular time and are place specific. One of the framework is City Region Food System Indicator Framework. Purposes of using this framework are assess the current status and performance of a city region food system following a whole system approach, identify priority areas for action with clear desired outcomes and ways of measuring change, help with planning strategy and action to achieving the desired outcomes, and establish baselines and monitor changes resulting from policy and program implementation. So this framework we can use to evaluate the system. It means to evaluate the status quo, but we can also use this framework and these indicators as a guideline for a change. So these indicators can show us actions that we can that we could take to start and to contribute in a food system change towards sustainable one. The City Region Food System Framework, you will find 210 indicators, and they are from production through to waste and food system policy and planning. And these 210 indicators are organized by overarching objectives, which are as follows: improve health and well-being and increase access to food and nutrition, improve social conditions for workers, build local culture and heritage, ensure acceptability of food provision for all city residents, increase local economic growth and generate a diversity of decent jobs and income, strengthen the city region food production and supply system, improve protection and management of ecosystems and environmental resources, improve horizontal and vertical governance and planning, and reduce vulnerability and increase resilience. This framework, you will find many indicators. It's 210 indicators, and it's not our point to use all of them, but to choose what we need. And in this slide, you can see the table, which is a sample of this framework. The whole framework you can find by clicking the link in the presentation. And the whole table is organized just like you see on the slide. So you will find possible indicators for overreaching objectives. And there are also mentioned outcomes and impact by using these indicators. So you can use this framework to evaluate, but also you can use these indicators as guides, as guidelines for action for a system change. And these indicators will have also correspond with SDG indicators, with Sustainable Development Goals. And you will also see here suggested data sources. So there is a hint how to collect specific data and what kind of methods you can use to find this data and analyze them. So here you can see only 3 indicators, but when you go to the whole framework, you will see this table for all 210 indicators. Of course, it is impossible and it will be very time consuming to elaborate, to do the whole evaluation of your local food system following all 210 indicators. It is also not necessary because not all of them will be appropriate and important for your case. When you start doing a food system assessment, you need to first decide what is your goal. What would you like to achieve by doing this evaluation? And then find specific indicators following the goal, but also indicators that would be place specific and important in this moment to achieve your goals and to start the food system change. In this framework, you will also find plenty of case studies. And here are mentioned cities that for which the food system evaluation have been elaborated already. So after this presentation, you can go and study more each of these case studies, each of these cases. It is all available by the links in the presentation. Another framework is Milan Urban Food Policy Pact framework. And this indicator framework has been developed from the longer city region food system indicator framework I just presented before. And it contains of 44 indicators, only 44 indicators. So it might be easier to follow them and to prepare your evaluation using this framework. And these 44 indicators are organized by 6 Milan Pact action categories, which are governance, sustainable diet and nutrition, social and economic equity, food production, food supply and distribution, and food waste. And the whole framework you can also find by clicking the link in the presentation. Now I will show you one example of indicator. And there are only 44 in this framework, in Milan Pact framework. So there are also much more developed. They are better elaborated than the previous, when this 210 in the previous framework. And each indicator has a card with explanation. And you can find here indicator, for example, indicator number 34, existence of policies, programs that addresses the reduction of GHG emissions in different parts of the food supply chain. And then how this indicator correspond with Milan Pact action, how you can measure the indicator, what kind of units you can use, what kind of analysis, how to collect data, what are possible sources to collect this data. You will also find more deeper explanation how this indicator works, and some glossary and examples and case study, and also how to prepare your evaluation by the indicator, how to collect data and how to disaggregate data. So for each indicator from these 44, you can find a card with all this information. And I encourage you to study some of these indicators after our session today. So we have many of these indicators, and just to sum up, we need to pick these that would be useful for our case. But it is also important to know what kind of power dynamics are involved in our food systems, which we will speak about it a bit later, and to something that could also help us to decide what kind of indicators we can choose is these general guidelines of 6 pillars of food system strategy. And these are focus on food for people, value food providers, localize food systems, keep control local, build knowledge and skills, and work with nature. So you can find which indicators will be good for your case, also in terms of these 6 pillars. Thank you. And now I would like to ask Roxana to present a case study of local food strategy evaluation in France.
I will continue with this local food strategy that I evaluated or lead the evaluation 3 years ago, and it's in the center of France. So my mission was starting from this strategy that was already 3 years old to elaborate a methodology of evaluation. So the area is called the food strategy, territorial food strategy is called Projet Alimentaire Territorial, and the area is Grand Clermont and the park, natural park of the Grand Forest. I presented again a slide that Marc Missel from Ferrand presented on territorial food projects in France, which are based on the law from 2014 from the Agricultural Ministry that was created as a tool to federate local actors to develop a resilient local food system. And generally, the projects are initiated by local authorities, but not only. Currently in France, almost all the territories cover 90% of the territories covered by this kind of strategy. And today we have 451 these strategies all over France. And the typologies are like 2 types: the one that support local production and answer to the local demands, and some others are more concentrated on nutritional different food dimension. As I said, the main goal was of this strategy are to develop a sustainable agriculture on food quality and to realize food system that support sustainable development goals, and to federate different players of the territory in order to build the strategies. Some critiques that were made in the beginning: the fact that the citizens are not enough represented in this strategies. The participatory is voluntary, but citizens are not enough organized to be involved or to have a voice or to be represented. They are poorly funded, so the financing by the ministry is not it's not too much. Generally, it's ensure the payment of worker employer will manage the project, and the impact is restrained because this kind of strategy needs strong policy and strong political support. Come back to our situation in Grand Clermont. The main objective was to improve the territory self-supply rates and offering inhabitants the condition for healthy quality food, accessible to all from circuits of proximity, and contributing to the development of a profitable agriculture for the farmer, respective of the environment. This territory, it's a bit contrasting because we have a very agricultural territory, which is in the green area, which is the natural park area, and a much more urban area, the red line, the urban and peri-urban area of the main city, Clermont Ferrand. Territory has 268 municipalities and 37% of usable agricultural area, and approximately 500,000 inhabitants. So it's among the biggest territorial food strategy in France. It was among the first 7 who started in end of 2016, and it was definitely the first who had to elaborate the methodology of evaluation. So I already mentioned the main objectives, and the important thing is that the actors involved, they participated in a collaborative horizontal work in a voluntary manner. So there were more than 250 actors, a lot of NGO in the food area, organic food area, farmers, militant and other associations, of course, local authorities and different actors like chambers of agriculture or industry, and also private actors in the food sector. As I said, it ran out to 150 structure. They had for the diagnosis, so this was the first phase, the diagnosis phase, the elaboration of the strategy. So it was based on 6 thematic workshop and several other action, and that lead to 6 strategic orientation, which are preserve and remobilize agricultural land in terms of surface area and quality for maintaining agri-local activity, support the development of practice in favor of sustainable agricultural environmental friendly, strengthen and create value chains to promote food self-sufficiency of the territory, develop a culture of healthy, local and responsible consumption, facilitate access to local products, especially for the socioeconomic vulnerable population, and also improve the quality of the public procurement and make so that public procurement is based mostly on local production. They also elaborated quantitative objectives, like, for example, divide by 2 the rate of land artificialization, maintain the number of agricultural and agro-food jobs, which is still very difficult today, and aim for 50% of food autonomy in fruits and vegetables, which for this territory asks for 4,000 hectares extra. This concludes the presentation of the strategy, a synthesis of the local food strategies, and starting after 3 years, they had like a target to start an evaluation process, which aimed to assess the state and the changes in the local food system during the 3 years of strategy, specify and monitor the quantify objectives set by the strategy, and make territorial food governance a local food policy lever. So this was that were objectives. The methodology was pretty simple because we didn't have much of the examples, so we stick to identify a few simple, relevant, achievable, and limited number of territorial indicators that must meet the objectives and correspond to the 6 main strategic axes, and involve local partners, and so legitimize the local network. So the process that I coordinated lasted 6 months, in November 2020 until April 2021, and these are the main phases of the process. So starting with the benchmarking of existing methodology of evaluation of the strategy, consulting other food strategy on the French territory. After elaboration of proposal of methodology, we had several group meetings in which we discussed the proposed quantitative indicators. We ranked this indicator, and then we discussed about the qualifications of more qualitative indicators that characterize the network of actors involved in the process of governance of the strategy. After all this process, we had bilateral meetings with important partners that would provide data. So the working group was established as in the slide by Agriculture Chamber, Commercial Industry Chamber, Employment of Chamber of Trades. I don't know if I translated correctly, Regional Directorate for Food, Agriculture and Forestry, the Departmental Directorate of Territories, Organic Producers Association, very important NGO, French NGO that works on acquire agricultural land and install new farmers and organic production. The departmental council represented by the agriculture unit responsible, members of the scientific council, mainly built by the researcher on food systems, SAFER, which is a French institution with generally managing farms that have no longer farmers, so farmer retired and they don't have any continuity. And SAFER is a state institution that it's managing the process of cultivation. It's buying the land or selling it, helping another farmer to install something like Terre de Liens, but less, I think, the less ethical approach, and of course local administration representatives. In this working group, let's say that not all they were present at each occasion. Some of them were present only once, and in general we have like up to 10 people present in the discussion. So this was a small group. The participatory process would be very difficult with a larger number, and the time was pretty short to elaborate this methodology. So this was adaptation to that time condition. So the benchmarking was by consulting a lot of researchers or responsible of food strategy in other territories. This is just a few examples. And also the benchmarking was built on the other food strategies, like the one presented by Aleksandra, but also CIALINOB, which is a French methodology of food system evaluation, which has 5 dimensions, like cognitive, social, political, economical, and geographical. And we try to, in order to select some indicators that are relevant to the strategic axis, we try to see which one could correspond to each axis of the territorial food strategy of Grand Clermont. In order to make a differentiation between observation, monitoring, and evaluation, I don't know, it's pretty theoretical. I don't know if you are aware, but there's a definitely a difference between the 3 of them. And after a discussion with the working group, we decided to build more like an observation methodology, because the strategy was not enough advanced to go towards evaluation. This was the plan synthetic approach of each axis, and this was the main methodology established with the working group. So we identify some few key actors, indicators, then we rank them, and then we work on the qualification of the governance. So how the actors network involved in the strategy is evolving and functioning. So after the first session, we invite everyone to propose indicators, and we arrive at these numbers, 88 indicators distributed as seen in the picture. Then we try to have a methodology of selection in function of availability, feasibility, and to select only a few relevant indicators per axis, and then to check again with which data providers to see if the data is available. and if the indicator is relevant based on the expertise of the partners. This is the selection methodology by their feasibility. So either we had already established indicators, or we had just data, and it was up to us to create a method of obtaining the indicator. The bilateral meeting were with only few of the actors of the working group, because only few of them have had data to provide. And so the method was very simple. By each axis, we had a proposition of around six, seven indicators, and we classified the first most important three of them. As you see, for example, what is the usable agricultural surfaces or area, and by major production, which part of it is organic or high environmental value, which is in the region was not yet the case, and which of this area was consumed by urbanization. I just translate a few of them. Let's see. So we had the main proposition, the imagine the data provider, then some few indicators that we left aside because we said maybe are complicated to be obtained, but or not so relevant. And so a few indicators related to the axis. Of course, all these indicators are related to the axis, which is preserve and remobilize agricultural land in terms of surface and quality to maintain agri-local activity, and some indicators selected by the benchmarking. So starting from this table, for each axis, we following the discussion with each partner, relevant partner, especially the ones who have data available, we reorganized the classification, and as I said, we arrived to around 7 indicators, from which 3 or 4 were classified as very important. Generally, the classmen didn't change so much, but there was a change. So all of this process lasted like 1.5 months, 2 months. And I didn't translate everything in English because it's a lot of information, but you can have just a quick view on the main axis and main indicators established. And you can see that we use, for example, some indicators from the diagnosis of Territorial Food Strategy from Aix-Marseille region in France, or FAO, so Milano urban food Pact policy. So here there was a changement. Sometimes we reformulate the indicators because the data provider or the expertise of the investigated partner pushes to extend the formulation or complexify or make sort of hybrid between the several papers. So you'll have the presentation. You can follow better. Here we it's about local diets. But here it's about especially a food aid beneficiary, and see if they are benefiting of qualitative food and enough food. Generally, this kind of axis gather consensus. But this axis is about facilitating access to local products. For example, what proportion of the household budget devoted to the purchase of local food products was an important indicator, percentage of local products in stores, and I can tell you from what I remember that all these data was difficult to obtain. So the availability of data, it's a very important issue, because as soon as we complexify the demand, it's complicated, and the source is not obvious, and so it's not an easy process. And the last axis was promoting the development of a stable health in local food and collective catering, so like public procurement, which meet a lot of consensus, and so the main indicators, the proportion of local products, the things, proportion of organic products in school meals, what price for a meal, and that was a base of discussion. So enhancing the budget for public procurement, it's also a discussion. Eliminating the criteria of the lowest price from the, it's also a discussion. So finally, we made a list with indicators to obtain from each relevant partner who had the data available, which, as you see, it's an important list, and agriculture was on one of the main provider. Another main provider was the Bio Association. So again, I didn't translate everything because it's very dense. Then we just started the discussion on the qualification of the actors, and just to check if everybody's included, there's fairness in the process, if the process is the effectiveness is of the collaborative system, it's functioning. Definitely in this kind of network, there's the question of responsibility and resources and political support, which are very important and are a factor of success. And so this was like an entire inquiry that was be addressed to all the 250 actors present in the strategy network. Yes, the main idea was to qualify how this network functions, the time, if it's functioning at full, and what there is to be done in order to improve its activity, and which are it's important qualities. And also at the time that we are really in the middle of the COVID crisis, I worked on this strategy in the time where I worked completely from home. I met everybody online, never did a site visit, so was pretty disconnected by this process. I felt the part. So this was like let's say the draft methodology of characterization of the governance of the strategy. And this is the final result. So after I finish this mission, then they continue with the data collection and establishing some kind of monitoring system, which result in this publication that you can access at this link. So this it's how it looks, and these are the elements they obtain. It's, for example, in the gray table, farms where they have at least an activity of diversification or a product which qualitative, and exploitation that sell in short circuit. In the more colorful table, you have things like how many jobs in each field and how many structure are acting in each activity. With for the general public, only French local public, and so that also the idea was in time for them to diminish the loss in the food production, to reduce the import and to increase local production. So this is it. I hope it was clear. I'm sorry if there was a lot of text in French, and then we can pass to the Q&A.
So yeah, we could see in this case study how it is important to pick these indicators and to create some links between them, and there are different actors. And now we will have a small exercise about forms of power in food system and how these forms of power could influence our food system evaluation. And so I would like to go back to the question what an indicator represents. And I would like to first quote Spence and Rinaldi from their paper, Governmentality in Accounting and Accountability, a case study of embedding sustainability in a supply chain. And the quote is, "We must be particularly sensitive to aspects which are hidden from our view by the focus on the process of embedding sustainability in the supply chain, and conversely seek to understand how and why our attention is being directed to other areas by the actors concerned and the field of visibility associated with the embedding sustainability in decision-making tool." And to think about this problem, we can use a framework of forms of power. And we have three forms of power: visible, hidden, and invisible. And visible power includes the aspects of political power that we see: formal rules, structures, institutions, procedures informing decision-making. So visible power, examples of visible power are elections, political parties, badges, laws, etc. But we have also hidden power, and hidden power is exercised when powerful people and institutions maintain their influence by setting and manipulating agendas and marginalizing the concerns and voices of less powerful groups. And examples include quality of some consultations processes that exclude some voices. So the question is, if there is any debate, any consultation, if all voices has access to this debate. And invisible power is the one that can be seen in the adoption of belief systems that are created by those with power. And so it is the whole cultural context in which we are, and some things we can consider as natural and we don't contest them. And for example of how these forms of power work, I would like to give you example from Poland. And we have a problem still of domination of car traffic in Polish cities, but also not only in Polish cities, but in between cities. I mean, in last 30 years, we developed very well car infrastructure instead of public transport. In some big cities, we have a good public transport, like in Warsaw, but in smaller towns, it doesn't work this way. And also we have problem, many people have problem to access smaller towns and countryside if they don't have car. You need to have car to get to some towns in Poland, and of course the impact is some social inequality in an access, for example, to workplaces, school for kids, and to connect some some towns with other places. And visible power behind this problem, of course, is some regulations of lack of regulations in terms of cars in cities. This is just lack of regulations that would forbid maybe car drive in the city, some special zones without cars. And hidden power is, of course, the groups that gain this power and setting the political agenda, like motorization lobbies, fuel lobbies, driving schools, and some particular interests of decision-making entities. And invisible power behind this problem is, of course, the whole cultural context, socioeconomic system, in which social status is related to a thing if you have a car or you don't have a car, and car is as a representation of success. It is also in education. You need to have driving license in your curriculum, and also in culture of individualism, car means independence, and of course in whole movies, literature, video games, so the whole culture that is surrounding us. And I'm giving this example as a person who is also a driver. I'm not against of cars, but I just want to tell you that starting this discussion in Poland is still impossible, because it just start many emotions around this topic, and we can't start a discussion, so we also can't develop better public transport in cities, but also in between cities. And this framework of power, forms of power, visible, hidden, and invisible, we could also use considering food systems and during food system evaluation. So to recognize hidden power, we need to recognize powerful actors and reasons for their agenda. And to see invisible power, we need to recognize cultural drivers which became natural for society and for you, for us particularly, and recognize who shapes and petrifies and keeps meaning. What kind of forms of power, visible, hidden, and invisible, are in our cases of living labs, because of course in the problem of food system and in our when we want to start and contribute in a food system change, we also meet these forms of powers, and it influences us, and it influences our approach, and it might also influence our assessment of food system. And here are some supporting questions just for discussion, but if you have other idea and other questions, you can also discuss it in breakout rooms. But it would be good to think, what are the real and expressed interests behind your choice? Because we also have some interests, and who are the major powerful players in the economic, political, civil society, and cultural that we think are with us, against us, and that can somehow influence the whole food system evaluation.
I thank Aleksandra for the presentation, the exercise. In the next session, Anna, which is here, we're also representing the Life Science University of Warsaw. We'll talk about monitoring and evaluation, and we'll have also an exercise and the compulsory reading material. So I wish you well a nice evening, and see you next week for the last session. And good luck to the assignment students.